Today, we're joined by Matthew Hoh, who is a Marine veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan, and now is a political and foreign policy analyst and is a senior fellow at the Eisenhower Media Network. And he's going to try to help us make sense of where we are with the US-Iran war today. Every day seems like a repetition of the day before, but hopefully, Matthew, you can help us with that. Thanks for joining.
Well, thank you for having me join you, Hadi.
Great to have you. My first question, Matthew, is does Trump have any military options to the Iran war without destroying the world economy? The U.S. ammunitions are extremely low. So what are the military options here?
It's just not the ammunition shortages. It's also the fact that the ships and the aircraft break down. And so you see ships aren't able to be kept out at sea for more than a few months at a time. We had these reports last month of the United States sending more fighter squadron, more refueling aircraft to the region. There's a lot of supposition that this is to foreshadow a larger escalation of the war, greater attacks. That may have been the case, but more than likely it was because the aircraft that are already in the region are breaking down. Let's recall that when this war started on February 28th of this year, the U.S. Air Force, the Navy, the Marine Corps, their mission capability rates for their aircraft, meaning whether or not the plane can work that day due to maintenance issues, was 50%.
Wow.
So before the war started, American aircraft, 1 out of 2 of them, weren't available to take part because they were broken down. They had maintenance issues. And the same thing, more or less, for the ships in the Navy's fleet. So you have this one component of, your question of the ability of the American military to fight this war, to sustain this war. And certainly the United States can kill a lot of people. And we've seen that, played out. We've seen that very clearly. But can they sustain it? And then the greater point then that comes from that is to what end? So in addition to the American military being overextended, being exhausted, being superficial, if you will, you have this reality that it doesn't have a strategic effect. So you can launch these 40 days of airstrikes against Iran, fly 21,000 missions with your aircraft, launch thousands and thousands of missiles, and have what effect on the Iranians? Yes, you killed a lot of their people. You killed their senior leaders. You killed their supreme leader. You supposedly sunk all their ships and blew up all their planes. But what effect did it actually have? So you have this question about what military options the president has. You see, he really doesn't have any because they're running out of missiles and ships and planes, as well as the fact that even if they did have all those, even if the stores were full, the stockpiles were full of missiles, what effect would it have on Iran? What could be done in another campaign against Iran militarily that wasn't accomplished in the first 5 weeks? And so this is the reality you have here. And then you had that really great caveat as well in your question, what could be done without destroying the world's economy? And that is what hangs over all of this. So certainly if the United States wants to escalate this further and bring real harm and immiseration to the Iranian people by destroying their critical infrastructure, by knocking out their power plants in 35, 40 C weather, and really immiserate the people, well, the return will be done to the Gulf Arab states as well as possibly Israel. And then when you talk about the energy infrastructure, sure, if you want to completely smote Iran's industrial capacities, destroy their energy industry, while the same in return will be done throughout the region. And that will bring you the global economic cataclysm that is very possible.
Yeah. And I guess that deterrence strategy has really worked for Iran to say, hey, you're going to hit us, the plants or the bridges. We're going to do 2 times to the region, to your allies in the region.
I think they said 4 times.
It keeps on going up. But then there's the other question of, whatever effectiveness you had in the first 40 days, well, that's going to be completely changed now because the assets have been moved away from the U.S. bases to Jordan now and to Israel. And so the distance to actually carry out those strikes have changed, right?
Right, exactly. And that has a number of factors as well. You just have that greater distance to travel. Well, that means it takes more time. And if your strikes take more time, that means you can obviously do less of them. The exhaustion on the air crews as well as on the airframes, these aircraft are decades and decades old. The refueling aircraft that the Americans use, the prime refueler, the KC-135, is 50 or 60 years old.
Yeah.
And that aircraft is the linchpin to the American campaign. Even the American aircraft that come off of the two aircraft carriers, which have been kept about 1,000 kilometers away from the Iranian coast. Sometimes they do go closer, but they pull back out. They've not been able to get any closer than 1,000 kilometers, maybe 700 kilometers from the Iranian coast because of the danger of the Iranian missiles and drones to those carriers. So that means you're, say, an F-18 coming off the carrier to do a strike mission. It can only go about 500 kilometers when it has its payload on it. Well, that means if your carrier is 800 kilometers or 1,000 kilometers away from the coast of Iran, your F-18s has to be refueled coming and going, and maybe more than once each way. And now, if your refueling aircraft are stationed out of Israel and Jordan, which is where they're stationed at, and primarily refueling aircraft are in Israel, they have to fly all the way across the Arabian Peninsula, rendezvous with those F-18s over the Arabian Sea or the Gulf of Oman, refuel. I mean, so you start doing all this, you're putting all this together, and you see how complex it becomes, how time consuming it becomes, the exhaustion on the air crews and on the airframes, as well as the Iranian strategy of pushing the Americans westward. So clearing the Americans out of their bases in the Persian Gulf. So essentially making the Americans unable to utilize the air bases in Qatar and in the Emiratis and Saudi Arabia and in Kuwait, as well as the naval facilities in Bahrain. You've now pushed the Americans to Jordan and Israel. So you're not only pushing them farther west, increasing this time, but also you are consolidating them, which makes them easier to strike because there's more aircraft parked right in these facilities. There's more. I mean, so you can see the Iranian strategy here and how they've stuck to it and carried it out over the last 5 or 6 months, and the effects that it has on the American military.
Yeah, and it seems there's a method to it where they don't want to escalate too much because they could hit those right now, but it seems like they're kind of gauging, how much escalation can they go, whereby the U.S. would react in a very aggressive way, and feels like they're managing that as much as possible.
Yeah, the only then they're not targeting the American bases in Israel or the Americans that are based in Israel, but they certainly have concentrated over the last month on the bases in Jordan. So where you saw a concentration, say, you go back to early or mid-July, concentration of Iranian attacks on Kuwait and on Bahrain, you then saw that shift towards a concentration of attacks on Jordan. And now the Americans have pulled their most vulnerable and their most critical airframes, the KC-135s, back to the refueling aircraft to Israel. And so that's where they're primarily located at. At some point, if the war was to continue, as we saw it continue in July, the Iranians would have to make that decision whether or not to attack Iran, because if these KC-135s, these refueling aircraft, are the key to the American campaign, if the Americans can't carry out a war against you without those refueling aircraft, you have to attack them at some point, right? It just at some point you're going to have to make that decision as to whether to allow the Americans to continue to strike you or to strike their aircraft that are the key to their ability to do so. That, of course, the fact that they're in Israel is a much more complex question, because that would then bring the Israelis back directly into the war with Iran. Now, the Israelis don't want that. The Israelis are happy, as many of them have said publicly, to see the Americans, waging this war on their behalf and doing it, without them. This allows the Israelis, of course, who are also overextended, to concentrate on Lebanon, on Syria, on Gaza, on the West Bank.
I mean, it's just crazy that Israel kind of started this, and now they're not even involved in it. It's just insane.
Right. Right. There's a genius to it. I mean, there certainly is an evil genius to it, right? But it is it's so overt and it's so over the top. But it's the reality of
Yeah. And then going back to the interceptors, because there are reports now that the U.S. has used 80% of their THAAD, 50% of their Patriots, which are the interceptor missiles that shoot down the ballistic, or attempt to shoot down the ballistic missiles from Iran. So, how did the U.S. kind of end up in such a situation where they've used up a lot of their interceptors?
A lot of this comes back just to the greed of the American military industrial complex. I mean, this issue in terms of being able to produce munitions is not new. We saw this in 2015, 2016, when the United States was running out of bombs to drop against the Islamic State in Syria and in Iraq. I mean, the Islamic State in their pickup trucks,
Yeah.
right? And the United States was running out of bombs a decade ago. So there have been indications for quite a while now that the American defense industry cannot keep up with the actual demand of the American military during warfare. We saw this over the last several years, the United States trying to provide support to Ukraine and the United States being unable to provide particular things like missile interceptors like the Patriots to Ukraine in the numbers that the Ukrainians need. And now, of course, this war, a war that was easy to understand how the Iranians would fight it. You'd be very dependent upon your missiles to shoot down the Iranian missiles and drones. The Iranians were not hiding how they were going to fight this war. They did surprise the Americans and Israelis in a number of ways, but their use of missiles and drones was not one of them. And so this unpreparedness, just not having enough, as well as having a defense industry that just can't manufacture enough missiles to keep up with the actual needs of the military. But of course, the American military industrial complex is not set up to provide for the needs of the United States military interests. It's to provide for the profits of the American corporations. And this is so exactly a result you should expect from something that is so corrupt, that is so greedy. You also have the Pentagon that has known this for decades, but they go along with it. So in addition to the military industrial complex's greed, you have the cravenness of the generals and the admirals in the Pentagon who for decades have understood this, but have looked the other way. A lot of it has to do with the fact that this is where the generals and admirals go to work after they retire. I mean, so we could go through weapons programs after weapons programs that have just, cost trillions of dollars, and I'm not being exaggerative, that have failed to perform, that don't work in combat, and can't be supplied as needed. So you have a weapon system like the Patriot, which again, you have known for how long that you would need this if you're going to fight Iran, as well as the history of the conflicts we've seen going back to 1991, when the biggest threat to American forces fighting Iraq were the Iraqi missiles at the time. And if people recall, the largest casualty event that occurs in that war in 1991 was a Scud missile strikes an American base and kills about 30 Americans. Should never have happened. Patriots should have shot it down, but they were unable to. I mean, but you have this understanding, and then you have the reality that that understanding wasn't followed. That understanding wasn't put into practice. So you have this reality where you have, according to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, and I should say this for people who aren't familiar with this, almost all of this is public information. The rates, the numbers of missiles the American Defense Department purchases, their rate of production, the contracts, all of this is publicly available information. There you go. Thank you. And so you can see how much, not how much they cost, but also too the stockpiles and then how many they can produce. And when you're looking at this, it's very easy to see the math. Particularly when through open source intelligence. And there's a lot of great folks out there who do what's called open source intelligence, which is they look at the videos, they're looking at media reports, but especially they're looking at now in terms of, say, for understanding what's happening with this campaign of missiles and drones, they look at cell phone camera footage, because very often there are people on the ground who are videoing these missiles. And so they can count how many Patriots are being fired towards every incoming missile or drone. And so while what you had before was this estimation, Hadi, that you would fire two defensive missiles for every incoming missile, right? So you have a 50% chance on each, of each missile hitting. But what they found, though, and this is what happened to Ukraine, and now we've seen it as well, is that you can't only fire two. You have to fire 3 or 4 or 5. And I'm not sure what the standard is now for the Americans in the Middle East, but it certainly isn't 2 to 1. It's probably on average, probably 3.5 or 4. So not only are you expending these missiles that you can't produce, you're expending them at a much greater rate than what your estimation was. So for your planning, it's all off. Your planning's off by a factor of maybe 50%. So, you have this, and then you get into the idea of how quickly can they make them? and they can't make them very quickly at all. So the Patriot missile, which is the workhorse for American defenses, they only produce about 600 a year.
Yeah.
That's 50 a month. So if you are firing 3 or 4, right? I mean, you can see how quickly you burn through these. And then the Iranians on the other side can produce their missiles and drones much faster than the Americans can produce the missiles to shoot down those missiles and drones. So it then becomes a question of how long time-wise until the Iranians have a missile and drone dominance that they can assert, essentially meaning they can fire their missiles and drones without really having to worry too much about them getting shot down. Meanwhile, the Americans, their Arab allies, and the Israelis have to now prioritize and ration what few missile systems they have left in order to shoot down those missiles. But the other part of this too gets back to this idea of how the Iranians fought this war. And again, knowing what they knew about the Americans, understanding the Americans' vulnerability, how the Americans would fight. And you saw how the Israelis, the Iranians struck at American radars, struck at command and control systems. People have probably seen the videos of these $20,000 drones, if they even cost that much, destroying $1 billion American radar systems, right? I mean, so that has, a number of impacts, but certainly the idea of starting to shrink the surveillance that the Americans, the Arabs, and the Israelis have in terms of being able to understand the Iranian attacks. And that's been part of the purpose as well in pushing the Americans westward. Not only are you pushing those American aircraft westward, but you're also the Iranians are demolishing the command and control, the radar, the communication systems that were set up in Kuwait, in Qatar, in Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, the Emiratis. I mean, so now you're closing the ability of the Americans and the Israelis and the Arabs to see what the Iranians are actually shooting at them.
Yeah.
So everything the Iranians appear to be doing here is very comprehensive. It's very robust, and it's holistic, if you will. It's all tied together.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't worry too much, Matthew, because I was told that we've destroyed all the missile launchers and all the missile cities, and they don't have any capabilities.
Right. I think it was the first week of the war,
Yeah.
second week of the war. Pete Hegg said that the entire Iranian defense industrial base, they probably used that term, an American term for it, was destroyed.
Yeah.
Just like the nuclear program was obliterated last year. The reality is nobody has any idea of how many missiles and drones the Iranians started out with. And no one has a real good idea of how many missiles and drones they can produce every month. The estimates I see are that they can produce between 100 and 200 drones a day, and they can produce maybe up to 100 missiles a month. And now in wartime, how much is that cut back because things are just more difficult? Their production has to be done covertly, right, in these underground, under the mountain missile cities. So maybe they're limited in that way, or maybe they're not. We just really don't know. What we do know, though, is that the Iranians, for 6 months now, essentially, have been able to sustain their warfare as they want to. And they also have the ability to set the tempo of this war. They can dictate the terms of this war. And so we saw last week, the Iranians, even though there was no fighting that day between the Americans and the Iranians, and there had been essentially a 3 or 4 day pause in the ceasefire, 3 or 4 day pause in the fighting, the Iranians deciding to strike the American bases in Jordan again, regardless, right? So the Iranians have the initiative here in all sorts of ways, but one of it is their ability to control the tempo of the fighting, as well as to essentially dictate the terms. And as time goes on, you're only going to see the Iranians have a greater ability to exploit that tempo in those terms.
Yeah. It's a very different Iran to a year ago. Iran was really playing on the defense before, and now it's kind of saying to Trump, we're not going to wait for you to stop.
Right.
You've opened the gate essentially, and now we can start whenever we want to impose a cost on you, with the goal of making sure that this never happens again. And I think that seems
Right.
the objective here.
Yeah, it's a very determined and serious Iranian leadership. Certainly, many of them have been killed over the last few years. But you understood the leadership as to reflect a wider understanding throughout their government, throughout their military, of the doctrine under which they fight, as well as their strategy and what their objectives are. And if you go back, I mean, I think one of the things that has taken many Western analysts most is the Iranian uh, ability to practice strategic patience. And so the Iranians able to not respond in 2024 or in 2025 to American and Israeli attacks, except in a measured, very defensive way. People can say this is because the Iranians weren't prepared yet. They didn't have all the resources they wanted. They didn't have all the missiles and drones stocked up as they wanted to. But also, too, I think this was a larger understanding of the Iranians of what their interests are and how they want to achieve them. And, in 2024, in the 2 rounds of fighting between Iran and Israel, and then in 2025, in the 12-day war in June, you had the Iranians saying, this is not the war. This is temporary, and we can go on with our lives afterwards. But this is not the war. But if it happens again, it will be a war, and it will be a decisive war. And that war will not end until there's resolution on our terms. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. So we're seeing an adherence to Iranian strategy, a determination to achieve objectives that their leadership has put out, that there's a consensus behind. So as much as we hear that there's disagreements within the Iranian leadership, that there's factions within the Iranian government, how much is the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps taking over control of Iran? I mean, all those things may be true, but the reality is that there are tenets and there is understandings that permeate throughout Iranian government and military leadership that they are adhering to. So no one should expect to see a change in strategy from the Iranians. No one should expect to see the Iranians give up on anything less than what they are stated they want to achieve. And that, of course, was before the war, not simply deterrence from future attacks, but sovereignty. And the way they've been achieving it, going after that has been, not just militarily. They've shown that they're able to fight the Americans and the Israelis and the Arab states toe to toe, symmetrically. They've shown they've been able to fight asymmetrically. But most importantly for the Iranians, they've showed that they've understood not just the regional dynamics, but global dynamics. And so their usage of economic warfare, just a fancy term for saying closing the Strait of Hormuz, right, it's been paramount. All right. I mean, so what you have is you have this ability of Iran to put together its political objectives, what it wants to achieve, and then using strategy to achieve those. And if you take that same measure, if you try and apply that to the Americans, you don't get anywhere, right? If you try to apply the Americans, what are the political objectives here? You keep going round and round in circles, and then say, okay, what's the strategy then to achieve those nebulous objectives? And same thing, you get nowhere. You get great tactics, you get great operations. Hey, the United States can send hundreds of airplanes over there, dozens of ships. They can all work together. Oh, gee, wow, terrific. What are the effects, though? They can kill lots of people. They can murder school kids anywhere they want. But what effects does it actually have in terms of achieving the political objectives as laid out by the U.S. government? Well, the U.S. government doesn't lay out the political objectives. So how can you create a strategy to achieve it? And even if they could, it's doubtful the American military, based upon decades of past performance, could put together a strategy to achieve those objectives. So, I mean, when you compare the Iranians to the Americans here, you really see a maturity, a seriousness, a wisdom from the Iranians that you just don't simply see with the Americans.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the interesting parts of the impact of this war is that it has destroyed this image that a lot of people have had about the Iranians that has been developed over decades, that they're irrational, that they want Armageddon,
Right.
that they're fanatical. And suddenly now we're shown actually a methodological, like they have a method, they restrain themselves. And when you look at, for example, to your point, the strategy has changed completely, because before, even in 2020, when they killed Soleimani, the person in Iraq who was a commander, Iran didn't really respond to that. It was more
Right.
kind of a show response, because they didn't want to get into a war with the U.S. And when last year when the U.S. dropped their bombs that obliterated the the nuclear, as we were told. Again, they told the Americans, we're going to attack you over here in Qatar and the Udeid Air Base, and they did that attack and then they stopped. But it seems like they've learned now this strategy isn't working because it just shows weakness, it seems like. And the Americans can just start whenever they want. And now it's a completely different approach.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and there is some thought as to whether or not it's also for the Iranians about preparation. I mean, the Soleimani case, where General Soleimani, who was the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, and was to the Iranians what, say, Dwight Eisenhower was to the Americans, or Wellington was to the British, in terms of importance, popularity. The idea may have been that the Iranians simply knew that this was not the time for them to have this war, that they needed X amount more time to be prepared for it, and this war wouldn't be on their terms. So I think there's some aspect of that. But also, too, there is an aspect that the Iranians, I think, did want to try and achieve things diplomatically, did keep coming back to that. That may have been very foolish and naive on their part, but I think that was part of the late supreme leader's understanding or desire. Now, I think with his son, as well as the new generation of leadership, you'll see that difference. And you'll see exactly what you're saying, this desire to act rather than to wait. So that strategic patience that we saw the Iranians stand upon for years, I think may be something that they see as a prelude to this. And now and we have to remember too, again, say go back to 2025, when the Iranians were talking about the 12-day war in June, they would say, this is not the war, right? This is temporary. But when there is the war, if this happens again, it will be decisive and it will be determinative. And so I think you have that as well, fortifying the Iranian will as well as their decision-making in this, that this has to be determinative. But I think your points are exactly right, Hadi. If I was talking to them, I would say the same thing too. You can't trust the Americans. You can't trust the Israelis. This has to be decisive. You will be attacked again. And I think that's the case. I don't think this war ends in the sense of no real good prospect for it starting up again until January 2029, if you have a change of leadership in the American White House. Other than that, I don't see the Israeli elections changing the political will on this at all from the Israeli perspective. And I don't see there being political change in Iran. And if there is any political change in Iran, it's going to be more in line with your suggestions, that they are determinative, that they are committed to this, that they are going to act and not risk being attacked again. So I think you're going to have, for the next 2.5 years or so, this on again, off again. And maybe it becomes more off again than on again. And maybe there'll be these deals like between Iran and Oman, and that allows for the strait to remain open for a week or a month or 2 months or 3 months or what have you. But I think the reality is that this will be at best a hot ceasefire for the remainder of Donald Trump's term.
Well, I guess that's the thing, because can Trump accept a defeat? Because if he concedes, Hormuz, there's this question about what it does to, the U.S. image, but also it's a kind of an attack on the dollar being the reserve currency, because now Iran can say, hey, whatever is moved through Hormuz, because now we control it, must be kind of bought, the goods are bought in different currency, Chinese currency.
Sure.
And so that is a crazy legacy to have, that you as the president generated this outcome. So can he accept that? Because, the other option would be, for example, as you said, let's stop right now. Let's deal with the midterm elections. Let's replenish our oil. Let's replenish our ammunition and start in a year and a half. Is that a likely possibility?
That's a likely possibility, and that's a rational possibility. And that's something that J.D. Vance, the American vice president, spoke of last month or maybe end of June, in remarks in a podcast or an interview of some form. He said that's what the Americans are doing, buying time to rearm, buying time for oil inventories to fill back up for. And we've seen it as we, as we speak today, oil is below $80.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not sure when the person who's listening to this right now, maybe it's 5 days or a week from now and it's back up to $100.
Right.
You know what I mean? This is the unpredictability and the uncertainty in which we're in, and we're dealing with an irrational president. So while you have had, I don't want to take any fault away from the system that got us here, from the decades of American obsession with Iran, that got us to this point. But you also have, in parallel to that, an American president who is finally willing to do what a Bush or an Obama or a Biden wouldn't do and attack Iran. And so much of this is tied into Donald Trump's self-image. We know that the only thing Donald Trump is loyal to is to himself. He's not loyal to anything else. He has no ideology. He has no convictions. Couldn't care less about the structures upon which his power rests. He doesn't really even care much about the Republican Party. And there's commentary now that he doesn't care at all about the November election, which I agree with. I don't think he does. What then makes Donald Trump deciding what he's going to do? And a lot of us observing him for all these years say he decides it in the moment. And I think that's very true. We're dealing with essentially a mad president, a mad king, a mad emperor here. This is not unknown to history. And so we shouldn't think that this is something that we can't be experiencing now. So I personally think, Hadi, that this back and forth, this on again, off again, I really think he likes that. I think that he feels that this demonstrates that he's in control. He can turn the war on again. He can turn the war off again. He can threaten, and then he can do favors for people and turn it off. He's showing how merciful he is, right? How magnanimous he is, right? His generosity in not destroying Iran's civilization because the crown prince of Saudi Arabia did not. I could, but the crown prince asked me, and he's a good friend, so I'll do it for him. Yeah. Right? I mean, this is Donald Trump's personality. There's another equally dark and worrisome aspect as well with Donald Trump is his self-enrichment in all of this. Donald Trump made $2 billion last year. More than $1 billion of that came from his family's cryptocurrency funds. Now, those cryptocurrency funds were heavily invested in by the Gulf Arab states. You also have Donald Trump, I think, earning about $700 million or so on his golf courses, his resorts, his branding. And a lot of that is also tied up in Gulf money. I mean, and so you have the larger aspect that the Gulf states are huge investors in the U.S. I think $140 billion or something tied up in American treasuries. I mean, so there is this connection. And on the other side for the Gulf states, why people ask, how come the Gulf states just don't walk away from all of this? It's complicated. One of those complications is that their currencies are tied to the American dollar. So it's very difficult for them just to say, we're done. We're no longer part of the American empire. Good luck to you. And there's other complications as well, too. But, I think for Donald Trump, there's some enrichment in this. And we certainly know that the accusations that market manipulation has been occurring throughout this war. Donald Trump threatens war or threatens great escalation, threatens to destroy Iranian civilization, whatever the threat is. And then oil price shoots up. And then at the last moment, he says, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to give him more time, whatever his excuse is.
Someone called me,
and
this guy called me, this guy called me, and yeah.
Yeah. And then what we've seen, though, is the evidence is all there that hundreds of millions of dollars in short bets, right, in shorts are being put on oil futures immediately before Donald Trump makes those announcements. So billions of dollars have been made during this war by people placing bets on the markets, not bets, these are guarantees on the markets that have access to Donald Trump. So we have seen this continually throughout. And so this idea that somehow Donald Trump himself isn't involved personally in the fortunes of this war would be a mistake. So I think those are factors here that make any of our discussion very fraught, because just not his irrationality, but also to his self-interest, which only he can gauge.
Yeah, and they're not even hiding it. I mean, he's now, as part of Truth Social, charging $100,000 to people that can have access to his post early on before everyone else.
They actually too were. There was an idea floated out of the White House a couple of weeks ago now that would work as well for official White House information. So that White House briefings would be, you pay for them. If you want to hear what the White House is going to say about something, you pay for it, or you can find out afterwards after these folks who paid about it told you about it. But certainly, yeah, that type of corruption. Don't want to be any more flowery than that, right? That corruption is it's always been there, certainly, right? Go back to Lord Acton, power corrupts,
Yeah.
but uh, this is just a spectacle unlike anything we've seen before.
Yeah. I want to go back to the point you made about the system. One question that a lot of people have is did Trump decide to go to war, or is there something else that drives war? Is he the spokesman or the author? Because no matter the president, we seem to always have war. And to have a president that comes and says, no more wars, no more Middle Eastern wars, and then starts one of the biggest Middle Eastern wars, the question becomes, who is setting the direction for those wars?
There's a guy named Tom Woods whose his quote is, "Every person you vote for turns out to be John McCain." And you certainly saw that with Barack Obama. And Donald Trump has bombed 8 countries in the last 18 months. I mean, so it's not just this war. This year alone, the United States has launched I think about 75 airstrikes in Somalia alone, right? You've had almost 70 boats attacked in the Caribbean and the Eastern Pacific without any evidence, any due process, murdering, about a couple hundred people now in those supposed
Right.
alleged, drug running boats. The desire for violence in this administration is there. They enjoy it. They think it makes them look tough. People recall last week or 2 weeks ago after Lindsey Graham's death, there was a video that surfaced of him talking on the phone to somebody saying how much Trump loves blowing stuff up, how jacked he
So
is about
giddy.
it. Yeah. But what you have, though, is you have a system that allows for all of this. You have an American empire that, in Iran's case, for 47 years has been desperate to right the wrong of 1979, to recreate the order of what existed, to take away this usurpation. And, again, sticking on Iran, the obsession over Iran throughout those years has been consistent. So wherein you may have had throughout the last 4 or 5 decades, adversaries and enemies to America that come and go, Saddam Hussein, Muammar Gaddafi, the Soviet Union, the Taliban, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Iran has remained consistent throughout those 47 years as one of America's chief adversaries. Uh, so you have this obsession with Iran, this desire to fix 1979. You have the reality of America as an empire, the need to constantly either, if not expanding the empire, then certainly sustaining it. You have the reality that nearly all foreign policy experts, practitioners, members of the establishment in Washington, D.C., are adherents to or acolytes of Henry Kissinger or Zbigniew Brzezinski, and the idea that the world is a grand chessboard. You go back to the Obama administration. Obama certainly had heavy pressure to attack Iran. He didn't do it. But what did he do instead? We had this war in Syria that killed 500,000 people. You had the United States essentially allied with Al Qaeda and Daesh, with the Islamic State. And what was the justification for it? It was because that removing Assad from power would weaken Iran. You go back and you look at what the members of that administration said during, and then most especially after, when Donald Trump in 2017 talks about pulling out from American involvement in the Syrian war. The apoplectic chorus from former Obama people is that this would help Iran. It's nothing about the Syrian people. So whereas you might have had a president like Obama who refused to go to war against Iran, who actually entered into the nuclear agreement, the JCPOA of 2015, you also had that same administration was willing to see 500,000 people be slaughtered in Syria, not for the sake of the Syrian people, but because somehow on this grand chessboard, removing Assad from power would weaken Iran. So this structure has been there. It's just now you have a president like Donald Trump who was willing to do something so reckless and stupid and counterproductive that a Bush, an Obama, and a Biden wouldn't do. And let's remember that Bush did Iraq. Obama massively escalated the Afghan war, right? I mean, so these weren't men who were reluctant to use American military power to get Americans killed. I think what you have is just this perfect storm. It was going to happen at some time, right? All the conditions were going to be met for the American empire because of its other problems, particularly domestically, to produce a president like this, and then marry that with the reality of the American imperial system. And then you get a war like this in Iran. And of course, you can't take away the Israeli influence in all of this as well. I mean, the Israelis are present along this, and but I don't want to. I don't want to either diminish or exaggerate the importance of the Israelis in this. They certainly are. The stories of Netanyahu going to the White House and convincing Trump to do this, probably incredibly accurate. But you cannot take away from the role that the American empire itself had in creating the conditions and the structure and the environment for a war like this.
Yeah. And so, the biggest kind of driver of that, would you say, of that strategy, of the funding that goes into kind of creating the plan that makes a president more easily execute, is that kind of from the Pentagon, or, in terms of the biggest driver?
It's very robust. It's very mixed. We have we're an imperial nation. We've always been. We were an empire before we were a country. You go back, look what the colonists were upset with the king about was the king stopped in 1763. The crown said you can no longer push westward into Indian land. And if you look at who many of the American revolutionaries were, many of them were land speculators, and they were upset that Tennessee, Kentucky, Ohio, Pennsylvania Western Pennsylvania were now off limits to them. And so you could see that in the earliest days of America, this desire for expansion, for imperial expansion. It's no coincidence that literally, I think it's 2 years. No, it's the same year actually. But regardless, when the last Native American tribe is subjugated, when it bends its knees to the American federal government in 1893, that's the same year, and maybe off by a year or two, but that's the same year that American Marines overthrow the government in Hawaii, right? So as soon as the United States expands westward, we take what's left of the continent, then the expansion, but even before that, you have American imperialism in Japan, in Korea, in China throughout the 19th century. You know what I mean? So it's always been there. There's been this desire to identify the American empire as starting after the Second World War when it simply didn't. It was there before, and the United States as one of the victors, and the sole victor that hadn't been burnt to the ground, with the exception of Canada and Australia, was able to maximize its position then. And that's when you see after the Second World War, you have George Kennan, who is the American author of the containment strategy of the Soviet Union, say to Harry Truman, the American president, the United States possesses 55% of the world's wealth, and we're less than 5% of the world's population. It'll be the obligation of every successive administration to maintain that imbalance. It's essentially what an empire does.
Okay.
And so going from there, you have then an American system built upon that understanding of what America has as one of the two empires. And then, of course, following this dissolution of the Soviet Union, there's only one empire, the United States. And you go back and you look at the George H.W. Bush administration, look at the Bill Clinton administration, you see what's said, this idea that the United States is the primary power. Primacy becomes the term. The unipolar moment has now arrived. And you have this understanding in American foreign policy thought that any threat, no matter how small, to that primacy must be dealt with. So immediately you see following, in the 1990s, the Clinton administration start to focus on China, right? When Condoleezza Rice comes into office as George W. Bush's national security advisor in 2001, she says America's chief concern is China, right? I mean, so you've always had this empire. And even if you go back to February or March, you will see American commentators talking about this war with Iran as being a war about China. And plenty of op-eds were written in February and March about how the importance of this war was not Iran, it's about China, right? I mean, so you see this American imperial thought resident throughout American history. And then, of course, it dominates American views and understandings and theories in both political parties. I think it's something that has always been with us. It's something that is also, I mean, and there's a more practical aspects of it. There's the military-industrial complex itself. There's there's the reality of how think tanks are funded, campaigns are funded. You have all those pressures too
FDD.
that make that make an
Yeah.
ecosystem, if you will, in Washington D.C. It's very difficult to get a job in Washington D.C. in foreign policy if you've not been vetted and approved by the military industrial complex. So if you haven't come through some avenue, whether it's the schools like Harvard or Yale or Georgetown or Stanford, that clearly align with a certain American imperial vision and American worldview that adhere to American exceptionalism, or you are at a think tank that's funded by the weapons industry, of which dozens in Washington, D.C. are. The vast majority of think tanks in Washington, D.C. are funded by the weapons industry as well as by foreign governments. That's important because about 7 or 8 out of 10 briefings in Congress are conducted by those think tanks. So when American members of Congress get briefings on Iran or China or Mozambique or wherever, it's not by the State Department. It's not by the Department of Defense or by the CIA. 3/4 of the time, it's by think tanks that are funded by the military industrial complex. Often those think tanks are also funded directly by the Pentagon, the State Department, the CIA as well. And then, of course, to be on a congressional staff or to be in one of the executive offices, right? To be at the DOD or at CIA or state or on the NSC, again, not to have that resume that has somehow been vetted,
Mm.
right? Somehow it is credible or serious that you went to Georgetown and that you worked, at Heritage Foundation or Center for New American Security. So if you go and you look at congressional staffs for members who are on Armed Services Committee or Foreign Relations or Intelligence, you will see a homogenous nature to them in terms of what their backgrounds are. And so this creates, again, this ecosystem in Washington, D.C., where, thought like this, the things that you said to me, Hadi, would be heretical. And someone like you would be considered not serious, right? I mean, and this is how you then get this reality that a war like this is possible. You just need a president willing to do it, like Donald Trump.
Yeah, that's really interesting. How you explain kind of the system. But do you feel, lastly, do you feel that now, given we've had so many wars that haven't succeeded, there's a limit to the military power? Are we going to get the message? If our future president's going to get this message now that it's not going to be working?
I'm hesitant to be optimistic on it. I think what you have is you have an empire that is a living organism. It's a leviathan, and so it changes and adapts. Right, it evolves. Wars have political consequences. Look at the '08, look at the '06 elections. Look at the '08 elections. 2016 elections have political consequences. Hillary Clinton doesn't become president because of the Iraq War. There are studies out there that demonstrate that. Right. This is when Donald Trump is viewed as an anti-war candidate. Right. I mean, so
Yeah.
so there are political consequences. And one of the things that you see that the Obama administration does, it understands that. And so particularly starting the second half of the Obama administration, you see a very real shift in American warfighting from having ground troops present and taking casualties to using proxies, using contractors or mercenaries, using drones, special forces, the CIA, et cetera, all things that are covert or maybe even clandestine. And you have this reality that American warfare can't have these physical costs because the American people will feel them and then they will vote on them. And so you've had this shift over the last dozen or so years away from direct American participation in war, but utilizing some form of proxy. But you've seen that unwillingness of the Americans to sustain any type of casualties in a number that would cause political consequences. Now, Donald Trump may not be so concerned about that. Again, we spoke earlier about the possibility that he may not be that concerned about the November elections. But yeah, I mean, so this idea of where does this go? Certainly the public opinion is there. Public opinion is against this war. This is they launched this war with less than 1 in 3 Americans supporting it, and now I think the number is about 28 or 29%. I mean, so The idea though that somehow this will be a turn, that the American empire will cede or listen to the will of the American people, I find very, very unlikely. I think they'll just further insulate the war from American public interest or opinion. They'll find ways to distract or use ways to distract, and they'll continue to try and outsource it. Now, of course, there are, we can do a whole episode on what this might look like when it's all said and done, in sense of what the American footprint in the Middle East would look like, in years to come. But certainly in terms of the American use of military to achieve what it wants, whether direct or indirectly, I don't think we'll see a change from that, regardless of who goes into the White House.
That's yeah. That's well, you can only hope of a turn of events that will end future wars. But I guess only time will tell. Matthew, it's been a pleasure speaking to you. If people wanted to know more about your work or follow you, where can they do that?
Sure. I'm with the Eisenhower Media Network, so people can just Google that, as well as you can follow me on X, Matthew P. Hoh, P as in Patrick. And I'm also on Substack. If you just Google Matthew Hoh and Substack, that'll come
And
up.
we'll put that in the show notes. Matthew, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Hadi.